It's a pleasure to share a conversation today with Phyllis Schwartz, a former TV executive who has enjoyed an extensive career as a newscast producer and now writes poetry and is the author of a new children's book, When Mom Feels Great, Then We Do Too. Welcome to Writer's Life, an ongoing conversation with writers, authors, and folks in the publishing industry. I'm your host, Marvel Harrison, Publishing Director, Mimbres Press of Western New Mexico University. Welcome to Writer's Life, Phyllis.
Thank you, Marvel. I really appreciate you having me here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to connect, and you've had such a wonderfully varied and exciting career. You know, most of us don't even get to have the idea of what a producer, TV exec does. And now you are launched into a published author. And, you know, I just want to hear about your world and how you made those transitions.
Yes, it's quite a leap from when I was working as a television news executive to now writing upbeat, fun children's poetry and children's books. But when you think about my background and my childhood, when I look at it now and look back, it doesn't seem that unusual of a transition. I was talking to my mom about this week, my 86-year-old mother. And when I was little, my parents read to me a lot. They were big readers, and picture books and rhyming books. And I loved to read. And I started writing too, little, you know, when I could write, when I knew how to write, little stories, little poems. I always kept a journal. I always kept a diary. I'm trying to think, maybe, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old and beyond. And so that started my getting into creative writing at a young age. But as I got into my teen years, my parents were both historians and teachers. And we used to watch the news while we were eating dinner. I know a lot of people say, don't do that. But because there was so much going on with the Vietnam War and the peace movement, every night we would sit and watch Walter Cronkite, and we would just be, you know, mesmerized. And so in my early teens, I got this notion. I loved the way words and pictures came together. So I loved seeing, you know, hearing the words and seeing the pictures of whether it was, you know, war or brush fires, whatever it was. I just got really turned on to that because here I already had this love of reading and writing as a kid. And I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. And I have colleagues that write for newspaper or write for magazines or do radio where the natural sound is a big, you know, part of it. But I just really dug that picture and word combination. So I made a decision as, you know, a teen and still in high school that when I went to college, I knew I wanted to be in television news, not in front of the camera, but I wanted to write the news and I wanted to produce the newscast, which basically is you decide what's the lead, what's the middle, where's the tape, where are the graphics, who's writing what, who's reporting what. And that's how I got into that piece. And so for a really long time, it was all about writing the news for that day, daily writing for the news. But as I got deeper and deeper into it as an adult, ultimately, you know, I got some really good jobs in the news business. It's a grueling business, as you can imagine. If anybody watching this is watching the news, you know, it's tough. Sometimes your stomach hurts. There's some nights I can't watch the news before I go to bed. So what I started doing is, in the evenings, if I work days, or in the mornings, if I work nights, I started doing my own poetry as like a release to let off steam. Sometimes it was about, you know, my boyfriend broke up with me, boo hoo hoo. And sometimes it was something observational or something fun. And so basically, while I had this news career, I was writing poetry parallel. And when I moved out here many years later back to San Diego, which is my home, to run the NBC station here, I had this big box full of handwritten and in some cases typed nicely on nice paper. And I brought it here and we threw it up on a shelf in the garage. And every once in a while, I write a little something, but I was so in the middle of you're running a station, and I had a family and all of that, that I didn't really have the chance to have my creative outlet like I always enjoyed. So during COVID, a few years ago, I was cleaning some things out and I thought, I'm going to go look at my poetry. And I pulled it out and some of it was really good. And I forgot how much I enjoyed it. So I started writing poetry again for myself. And I submitted a few things. I got a few things published, but I wrote a poem that was pretty rough about a cancer experience. I've had cancer 3 times, and about finding out whether your biopsy was malignant or not. And I got bad news, and I wrote a tough poem. And after that, I felt good about it, but something hit me later where I wanted to write something upbeat, because although my experience had been rough, I benefited from some good medical care and my family's really into humor and support from friends and colleagues. And so I just started tooling around and I wrote a children's poem. And I had loved children's poetry as a kid, and I loved picture books as a kid. But I had all those years, except when I read to my children, it never occurred to me to write poetry for children. So I wrote this poem. It just came right out of me. It was like, bloop. It was strange. And it was the poem that has become my book, When Mom Feels Great, Then We Do Too. And it was about, as you know, a mom who comes home and she doesn't feel well. And the family, the extended family, and some friends and neighbors rally around her to help her have fun and do some chores and make her favorite cookies. And I really liked it. And I thought, wow, this feels like a kid's book. And when I was a kid, I loved Dr. Seuss and Madeline and Two Straight Lines. And so I got this really good feeling about it. And I cleaned it up and I had an editor work on it. And I connected with a brilliant children's illustrator, Siski Kala, who's down in Chile now. And it all kind of came together. And for me, it was this wonderful feeling of connecting back to my childhood and what I had enjoyed as a child, and my relationship with my parents, who were really into reading and having fun and humor, and then having that experience, translating it to my family and my children, and then saying, you know what, the realization that it helped me through my cancer experiences and my health experiences, that maybe this book would be helpful to parents or teachers or social workers, because it's not a downer, it's really upbeat. And after years of doing hard news, it was a great exhilarating feeling that I could use my writing that kind of for me to enjoy, but maybe there was a way to have others enjoy also. And so I pushed really hard to get it published. It's coming out in a few weeks. And I've had some reviews already where educators of small children have said exactly what I was hoping that I was putting out there, which was so fulfilling. And they said that they felt that this would help teachers or parents who have to bring up this issue of maybe a sick or hurt parent. And so while I was working on this book, right away, I started writing other children's poems, which hopefully will soon turn into other children's books, particularly rhyming picture books, which I still enjoy. And my children, who are young adults now, they still keep their favorite picture books on their dressers, bookshelves, even though we always make them go in, come on, clean that stuff out. But they have a few things they just love. And, going back to Goodnight Moon and all those that, I mean, look at how, I think that, what is Goodnight Moon? Is it 60 something, 70 years? So I have been able to find an outlet for my creativity and my writing that doesn't only tie back to the more serious, hardcore kinds of things I had to do in news. And that's been a big revelation for me and just a really pleasing thing to me.
Well, and it seems in your process that you went from this, oh, I got this bad news, and you're very gentle with describing it as it was rough, because I'm sure there were days when it might have felt
Really tough. Yeah.
really, really tough, and that you knew there was a way to share that experience. And I'm keen on that in the book, although it reflects in part your process. You were very care-filled without to not talk about cancer. And
Yes.
you know
That was
that
purposeful.
yes, I understand that and I respect that. And it's like, well, first of all, it takes it to a broader breadth of there's lots of things
Exactly.
that people
Yes.
can experience, but more importantly, it I think it's a little bit like not calling someone a diabetic. They're a person with diabetes. You know, that there's a way of
Correct. No,
identifying someone, mommy, she's not doing so well today, you know?
no, that's exactly right. And I think you really hit on something important. It's a reaction that I have, and many people that I know with illness, cancer or otherwise. I don't want to be defined by my cancer or my illness. On the other hand, I do want to have a respectful dialogue with people about it if that's something that needs to happen. I purposely did not use the word cancer, but I was careful. I didn't want to trivialize. I don't want to trivialize the cancer or serious illness experience.
Mhm.
So I'm not trying to make it out like tra la la la. It's all rainbows and butterflies, but I wanted it to not be scary. I wanted children and parents, because not all adults want to talk about these things. I wanted them to get drawn in a positive way and respond, emotionally in a positive way. Like, you know what, there are some things the kids in the household can do, or the spouse, or granny, that are positive, because none of us can wave a magic wand and say, poof, you don't have cancer. But what I find important is even the littlest kid, or maybe even, the crankiest neighbor or relative, can see that, well, maybe they'll be a little quieter in the house, or maybe they'll help with a chore, like making the bed, or I think that there are things people can do in the household or in the neighborhood that are positive, even if when you have someone that's hurt or sick in your household, your neighborhood, or my first experience with people supporting me were colleagues in a newsroom. I wasn't married, I didn't have children, and I was in Chicago. My parents were in San Diego. So my colleagues in the newsroom rallied around me with positivity.
Right. And I think what you've been able to express and share in your book is it's not about cheerleading somebody.
Correct.
It's not about rah, rah, rah. It's about honoring that someone is in a difficult place, but that they don't become the difficulty. And that the reality is, I mean, as a psychologist, as a family systems therapist, kids always know what's going on.
Yes.
In a felt sense wise.
Yes.
And so they're going to respond and react to what's going on around them. And I think that when there's all of that, to me, it's a trite positivity just for the sake of positivity and cheerleading.
Correct. I
think
agree.
it's set up for children to really struggle because they're feeling something very real in themselves about the
Right.
truth of what's happening. And then there's all of this bopping around that doesn't meet their reality. And they begin to doubt themselves and the security
So
within who
true.
they are. So I honor the way that you did in such a self and other respectful way, Phyllis, to present
Thank you.
really nuanced topic. And
Well, it's kind of touchy and quite kind of twitchy, because I didn't want other folks that have serious illness, whether it's cancer or COVID or whatever, or someone who breaks their leg and they got to lay on the couch for, 2 weeks. I didn't want a parent to say, she's simplifying it, or she's being disrespectful.
Or minimizing it.
Or minimizing, that's the perfect word. And it's interesting because I purposefully did not want the mom to be in bed. I made a big deal about that. In my mind, as I was putting it together, I wanted her out of the bedroom. I didn't want the kids. There's one point she comes home and she gets in bed. Like when I was sick, there were times I didn't feel well. I felt tired. But I know as a sick person, I really pushed myself to get out in the living room, in the common spaces, or go into the kids' rooms, or hang out, even if I had to sit down on a stool in the kitchen, because I wanted the family members to know that it was important to continue that communal experience, and not to make it where that's the sick room. That's the sick one, and that's a sick room. Even if mom has to lay on the couch with a blanket. And I say kind of gently, and that some of the parts of the book reflect, it's not autobiographical, but it's some of my stuff. I don't like getting wet in the rain, and it does make me cranky, but there's a scene where the kids are playing out on the porch and the rain is outside, but they're cozy on the porch and they're playing a game with mom. And she's sitting in a rocking chair instead of standing up and dueling them with, fake swords. But it's the fact that she went outside, and it wasn't like, come on, mom. Or she is not just hanging out in her bedroom. And she can get up and dance to Motown tunes, which are my favorites. So I tried. My children were not really little when I had cancer. My first cancer, I was in my 20s, and I was just working and dating. And my second cancer, my kids were like teenagers and almost heading to college. So in my head, though, this kind of book was really about the child in me that I still have, and my childhood connection to being a kid and being read to, and then my parent experience of being an adult and reading to my little kids. And all of that made me think, well, if I'm sick or hurt, how do I want people to treat me, whether they're little or like the neighbors? There's a thing in my book, but the neighbor comes over and helps with some laundry, gives me some socks. So I tried to kind of walk a fine line. I wanted upbeat and fun and humor, but I didn't want it to be so goofy that another cancer survivor would say, guess what? I walked around and, it wasn't like that.
Yeah. Well, and everyone's going to have their own experience, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that the real piece of connectivity, Phyllis, in your story is that need for belonging and connection. And
yes,
when you talk about community space, and it might not be their experience or how a person with an illness is dealing with it, but it could be a possibility of invitation to something that they might try. And
yes, I agree.
And I think that's where that part about the educators comes in. And, I'm just reflecting back to where you've come from the news,
Mm-hmm.
and, the words and storyline and images to this. And as much as I don't want the news being all negative and dreaded and over dramatized,
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the realism of what you've struck on without it overpowering that a person could relate to it.
Thank you. I take that as a very high compliment. I really do.
And so how did you find your illustrator? He in a children's book.
There's a really great platform on the internet called readsy.com. And you can get on it and find, like the woman who did my editing on my,
Mhm.
turned my poem, it's pretty much the poem is the book, but cleaned it up for publication. I found her on Readsy, and I found the illustrator on Readsy, and they don't help you get it published, but they will, they vet people ahead of time. And so once it's kind of a long story, but this woman who was my editor, a friend turned me on to her because she did a YouTube lecture. And I said, oh my God, she herself was an editor and a writer of children's books. So I contacted her on this platform, Readsy, REEDSY.com. And it was filled with different folks who could help you with marketing, illustration. And so that's how I found the editor. And then I found this wonderful illustrator. She's from the UK. She lives in Chile. We've never seen each other. Everything was done on the internet and also through the platform, through emails. And we did have a few organizational phone calls. And if I'm lucky, and she wants to work with me on my future books too. And she really got me. And she was not a cancer survivor, but she had other health concerns that she'd had in her life and with her mother. And it hit her, and she had little children, and it just hit her really right. And we just were simpatico long distance. There's many ways to find an illustrator. That was just mine.
Right. And it doesn't really matter what the tension is in a household, whether it's around illness or marital discord or partner
Yes.
angst, whatever a person's scenario happens to be, children feel it all.
They
I'm
get it.
a strong believer that children learn affectively way more than they do cognitively. And they are like
Yeah, that's true.
superstars of picking up on all of the feelings. So I think your storyline of we all do better when mom's doing okay.
Yeah, exactly. When she's great, we're great. And it's with spouses. My husband always says, when she's great, I'm great. I think that goes with coworkers.
Right.
Also.
And I recognize that that's not a total issue of a pathology around dependency. I think it's more about just the reality of
Right.
when you walk into a room, most of us can sense how tense someone or something or the air is. And when we can decrease that tension in a realistic way, we have hope for connecting. And I think that's what you're after.
Yes, it is. And going back, I think with little children, or any age, I guess, but in this case, it's little, it's important for them to feel that they can contribute. Mm-hmm. That it's not just, you're right, they feel the stress, tension. Well, mom and dad will take care of that, or granny will come in and, she'll do that and bake and cook. But there are some things that they can come up with that can make them feel good about making a loved one feel good under a stressful situation. And that's important because otherwise, I think family members, this is my experience, family members and friends, when you're sick, they feel helpless. Like I might feel angry, tired, sick, post-radiation, whatever. But I kind of set an agenda. This is what I have to do. I got to go see a doctor, have to get something taken out. I have to have radiation. But when you're the loved one or friend surrounding someone in that situation, you often feel helpless. And I think this shows you that small gestures and just being helpful really can contribute. And I think especially with children, they want to know, they don't want to be shut out, not only from the information stream. I think you alluded to that earlier. They sense it, but they also don't want to be shut out from positive, constructive actions that might lead to a positive, constructive outcome. And there's no question in my mind that humor and helping and hugs, it helped me heal. I mean, I watched Marx Brothers movies, my first cancer, but I also love the fact that my family tried to cheer me up, but not just, haha, we're going to cheer up mom, but they did some things that made me feel good and actually feel great. Mhm. What I wanted to say is there are many elements of this book that are autobiographical, but not all. But one of the things that I told the illustrator when she did the book is follow my poetry and illustrate the words. But I told her, and I'm going to show you my book. This is the book, but I want the mom to have red glasses because I always wear red glasses. And to me, that's a little bit of a fun thing for me, a little tickle, but also for people that know me to say, we can tell this book is not exactly Phyllis, but there's Phyllis in the book.
Okay.
And I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, thank you. And it's been a joy to speak with you today, Phyllis. And thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who has joined us. I'm Marvel Harrison, and from all of us at Mimbres Press, may your day be sparked with curiosity and wonder. See you again on the next Writer's Life.